Hello everyone, it's Infinity Gamer here and welcome to another Code One bat rep for Infinity the game. So it's my O12 going up against a friend's Combined Army, mostly Shasvastii list. So in terms of my list, this is what I'm bringing. It is 30 points, 6 SWC on the nose of O12 goodness. So I have my Delta, which is going to be my hacker, so that I can get the bonus for moving consoles and pressing consoles if I need to. I've then got my Razor, who has the hacking device as well, so again, I get that bonus to switching on consoles if I fancy it. I've got two Epsilons, both with multi-snipers. I feel like these are going to be good fun if they can provide some decent overwatch for me. The Gamma, who is my lieutenant with the firebuck. The Beta Trooper hacking device, again, so that if I can get near a console, at least I get that bonus to being able to do so. Then I've got two Gangbusters, both with boarding shotguns. Those have infiltration, so they're going to start a good way up the board and hopefully stop his models from getting into my quadrants. I've got Hippolyta with the Breaker Combi, who's basically going to rush up, try and get into the quadrants and also mess some stuff up. And then the Omega with the multi-rifle and heavy riot stopper. So that is my O12 list this time for this domination game. And let's see how deployment goes. And we're going to roll for the whip. So I win. So I choose the deployment sides and I choose to make him deploy first, so I know where everything is going. So he chooses to go first as a result. So in terms of his deployment, we've got quite a lot of camo tokens. So on that roof there, we've got a camo token, we have a Guelo, we have a slave robot going down next to that. Camo token down in the Aristea Hexadome Arena. Don't know quite what that is, that's prone. So we have Dr. Worm being put down here at the back in prone, and that is next to a Q drone, which has total reaction HMG, which is pretty scary. Another camo token going on the roof, and another camo token going into the stadium building. Then in terms of my deployment, I put my Beta Trooper there on the far right hand side. Hippolyta down behind the building. I then have an Epsilon, which looks like a Team Serious person, but that's because I couldn't find my Epsilon model, which is terrible. So we have an Epsilon there on the roof. I then have a Gangbuster forward and prone. I then have my Omega in the center and next tucked into the building. Then I have my Gamma on the rooftop prone and a Gangbuster forward. So in terms of how that... Oh, and then I've also got a camo token hidden in the middle, which is my Razor model. So then in terms of the model that he held back, we have Sheskin. I know it doesn't look like a Sheskin, but it is a Sheskin. And then I have an Epsilon, which I put on the rooftop there, overlooking most of the map. So then in terms of first turns, first thing he does is activate a camo mocha. The Caliban comes out of camo state to surprise shot my Epsilon with its Spitfire. We didn't catch it, but I actually rolled saves on all of his shots, so that was a great start for me. Very, very happy. He decides that that's worth doing again because otherwise the Epsilon is going to prove to be a pain for his objectives. So because he's no longer shooting from outside of camo, I no longer suffer the -3 for surprise shot, so I'm actually on +3. So he does it again and shoots me with the Caliban using a Spitfire on the Epsilon. My one shot is way too high. He rolls with 3 hits again, and whereas I save 2, sadly the 1 is enough for the Epsilon to go unconscious. So this is with his third order. He moves the Sheskin up towards the console, attracts an ARO from my Gangbuster. So the Gangbuster ARO shoots, and the Sheskin decides to ARO shoot him back. So I'm suffering a -3 penalty, and he is suffering a -6 penalty. My 4 is a hit. And his 6 beats my 4. So only one of his goes through. And I save it. So with his 4th order, he moves Sheskin up. So the Sheskin has moved up into the Lynx's zone of control and is also now in line of fire of the Gangbuster as well. So the Gangbuster chooses to shoot the Sheskin and Razor decides to spotlight hack program. And then Sheskin decides to shoot the Gangbuster again. So I take 3 hits, thanks to my dice knocking his from a 15 to a 4. And then my saving throws plus cover. I think we forget mimetism, and the Gangbuster takes the wound. And then the Spotlight is a normal roll as it is unimposed, and it goes off. So Sheskin is now targeted. So with 5th Order, decides to activate the Guelo and move him up with the first short skill. Epsilon declares an ARO shoot as an ARO response. We're both hitting on straights. And as a result of that, my 9 cancels out his 2 9s and the one below that, so nothing happens. Good result for the Epsilon. That was his 5th Order. With his 6th Order, so the Guilo chooses to move ever so slightly just to get different arcs of fire. So the only ARO present is from the same Epsilon again, and she decides to shoot for a second time as an ARO response. He decides to shoot back at her. So in terms of modifiers, it's the same as before, which means that we're both hitting on straights. We realised this time round that I have mimetism, which means he's -3. I successfully hit on a 4, which is nerve-wrackingly low. He's looking for 10s. Beat the 2s. I beat it all. My shot goes through, and now he has to make a saving throw. Because I used DA, he's actually rolling 2 dice. So he saves the first one, thanks to his nano screen +3 and his armor. Second roll is a dropped roll. And he makes that one as well, so the Guelo is fine. So with Order 7, he decides he needs another crack at that Epsilon. So we roll again, and I am on straights again. I roll a critical hit. 3 6s and a 19 are not quite what he's looking for. So because it's DA and a crit, he has to make 3 saves against that 1 successful hit. Saves 1, he takes 2 wounds and goes unconscious, which, because he has the Shasvastii keyword, he actually goes to Shasvastii embryo state. So with the 8th Order, he activates the Worm Slave and moves him up towards the Guilo. The Epsilon gets line of sight to that, so decides to ARO shoot the slave drone. So because there are no modifiers in place, my Epsilon is actually shooting on a +3 this time. And it's a normal roll against the slave because he has used his second short skill to heal the Guelo. The Doctor roll is successful, so the Guelo has a wound removed and returns to conscious state. And my shot is successful, so the slave has to do 2 saves. And the slave bot is dead. But the Guilo is returned from Shasvastii embryo state and is up to and has 1 wound remaining. So with the 9th Order, the newly resurrected Guilo decides to activate again. He decides to move, shimmy a little bit with his first short skill, and the Epsilon is going to choose to shoot as the ARO. The Guilo decides to shoot at the Epsilon, unsurprisingly. So we are back to straights for me and -3 for him. I hit with a 6. He gets 2 hits on me. +3 for cover. I'm looking for 11 pluses to save this one. And the Epsilon goes unconscious. So Sheskin moving into the building, that is using the Lieutenant Order, and decides to move 4, then 2 into the building. So I go for a hack ARO from the Razor, and he goes for a reset. So my 3 is successful. Doesn't matter, he manages to reset. So now Sheskin is no longer targeted, and then as a final regular order, decides to re-camo the Caliban. That is the end of his turn 1. We now go into O12 turn 1. So things are looking pretty grim at the start of the O12 turn. We have lost 2 Epsilons and a Gangbuster, so that takes us down. And obviously we haven't started with the Delta on the table because he is still in reserve. So we are down to 6 orders, which is a rough way to start a round. So with my first order, I decide to move Hippolyta up the field. She attracts no AROs that time, so then uses her second short skill to move up even further. We then check line of sight, and if she moves any further, she's going to attract an ARO. However, with the distance, I feel it's worth the risk, so I spend my second order to move Hippolyta up even further. And the ARO doesn't come. He decides to not perform an ARO, which enables me to move Hippolyta up slightly more. So with my third order, the Omega decides to move up 4 inches with her first short skill. From that vantage point, the Omega can just make out the Caliban's silhouette token. And then with the second short, so the Caliban decides to not do anything as an ARO and just decides to stay there. So the Omega decides to use a Discover for the second short skill. It's successful. The Caliban is discovered. So fourth order, the Razor, who can see through that gap and see the back of the Caliban, is going to move to stand up. So Sheskin, who is inside the building and within the zone of control of the Razor, is going to choose to reset as their ARO. So their Caliban decides that it is going to dodge, and then the camo marker that's inside the Aristo's changing area decides that it's going to reveal it's a shrouded hacker, and it is going to try and hack the links. It's going to try and do Carbonite as its ARO response, which makes the decision making pretty difficult for me now. I can either contest the Shrouded's hack and try and Carbonite the Shrouded, or I can try and gun down the Caliban. Difficult decisions. I decide in the end to go and Carbonite the Shrouded. So the normal unopposed dodge on the Caliban is a success. We skip over the reset for Sheskin because it's not being targeted, so it would be a completely redundant roll. So Carbonite's burst 2, so I roll 2 dice, he rolls 1 in ARO. I am too high in my rolls, but we determine that mimetism doesn't affect hacking rolls. We do sit down and read this for a little bit, and there's nothing that specifically says either way, so we go that mimetism does not affect quantronic hacking programs. So then I need to spend an order on Hippolyta, which is actually a bit of a waste, but it's because I messed up her facing when I did move her, and she now has, unfortunately, her facing arc going into the building, so she's completely useless if something ever comes near her. So I spend a movement and move her in and turn her around. With my final order, I move the Gamma down the stairs, prone, and down into behind the container. And then using his Lieutenant's order to move the Gamma forward to the corner of cover. So at the end of round 1 and the end of my turn, we are 1 objective apiece. So it is currently a tie. So it's important to note that he's starting this round with a full complement of 10 orders, because even though I killed a slave bot, that doesn't contribute to his order pool, so I haven't done anything to whittle away his orders. So with his first order, he decides to idle with his Shrouded. In terms of AROs, I decide to ARO hack with my Razor using the Carbonite program. And unsurprisingly, his second short skill is a declaration to Carbonite my Razor from his Shrouded. Oh, my 7 is good. Mine is the successful roll, but he gets to roll a save against it. Now, Carbonite's double action with 13 damage, so he's going to roll 2 saves. He saves 1, but because the other one goes through, he is now in an immobilized B state. Fantastic result for me. So with the second order, first short skill, his Q drone decides to move over the little slave bot. So then in terms of AROs, my Razor gets line of sight. Oh, but this is pretty nerve-wracking. I choose to ARO dodge with my Razor, and then he decides to shoot me with the Q drone. Now, he's hitting me on 5s. My dodge roll is successful. Luckily, my dodge roll beats all of his shots, so my Razor lives another day. I choose to not move my Razor at all, even though it's eligible for a 2-inch move, and just keep it there to try and be a bit of a distraction, really. Third order. He activates the Guilo and moves it out of cover. The Gamma is the only model that can ARO that Guilo move, and so decides to ARO shoot. The Guilo, of course, decides to shoot at the Gamma with its second short skill. So we're both suffering a -3 penalty thanks to covers and ranges. My 5 is successful, he's looking for 10s. My 5 beats his lower rolls, but the 9 and the 7 beat mine. So the Gamma takes 2 hits and has to now make 2 saves. And he takes a wound as a result of that. The Guilo, with the 4th order, chooses to activate the Guilo again and decides to move with his first short skill out onto the bridge. My ARO from the Gamma is to shoot again with the -3 penalty. I roll too high and he gets 1 hit onto me. And unfortunately with that save throw, that takes my Gamma unconscious, which is not ideal. That next order now goes on the Guilo. So next order, back on the Guilo again, and decides to move the Guilo further up along the bridge. So as there are no AROs attracted, he decides to drop the Guilo prone and move 2 using the cover. The Guilo gets another order. It's going to stand up and move to grab line of sight onto the Razor. The Razor chooses to ARO dodge in response to that, and the Guilo is going to shoot at him. He is +3 for range, but I impose the -6 mimetism, so he is -3 in total. Sadly my roll is 1 too high, so fails his dodge. And he manages to get 3 hits on my Razor. And my Razor takes 2 wounds. So he is dead, removed from the board. So with his 7th order, chooses to move the camo token to the edge of the building to look down on Hippolyta. With Hippolyta, my ARO is to delay. He chooses a second short skill to shoot at Hippolyta and reveals the model as a result. He reveals a Malignos in that place, and then as my response, my delayed ARO is to shoot him back with my breaker combi. Once surprise shot has been applied, so I'm +3 for range, -3 for surprise shot, -3 for cover, -6 for camouflage, or -6 mimetism, so I'm -9s. He is only -6, I'm -9. Unfortunately, my 10 is too high. And then with his rolls, the 4 is fine and the 6 is a crit, so I now have to make 3 saves. And thanks to my armor 3 and my cover and my great rolling, I save all 3, which is a great result. So 8th order, he decides to idle the Malignos. My ARO is to shoot back, and then his second short skill is to shoot again. We are both now on -6. I've improved from -9 because now there is no surprise shot in play. Oh, my shot misses, it's way too high. Oh, his 6 is a crit and the 2 is successful, so I've got to make 3 saves again. So sadly I fail one of my saves, and so Hippolyta falls unconscious. 9th order activates the Guilo again, moves it up, and because he faces no AROs, decides to move the Guilo up again with the 2nd order to get into my quadrant. So the 10th order decides to activate the camo token on the rooftop and move it towards the console, and for the second short skill, decides to try and hack the console, revealing the camo token to be a shrouded hacker. Fails the hack on the console. So at turn 2, round 2, so my turn, I'm starting with 3 regular orders and my lieutenant's order. Things have been pretty brutal. In fact, we actually have to do a points check at the end of his turn to make sure that I haven't lost so many points that I go into retreat. Basically, if I have 7 or fewer, then the game would end at the end of my turn, which would actually give me a chance to potentially win if I could get enough quadrants. Sadly, I have 9 points left, so we are safe to play another round. My first action doesn't involve any orders, but it involves bringing the Delta in where the console is. Now, my plan here, hopefully, is if he succeeds his roll and lands there, is that he might be able to shoot the Shrouded off it, he might be able to turn the console himself, he'll be in a quadrant, so even though I'm down to about 4 models once he arrives on the table, this can actually help me control the game in the final round. So all I have to do is pass my roll. So rolling on my PH to see if I land where I want to end up. And I roll too high. He has failed to drop in where he needs to be. And I don't mind admitting it, that's probably costing me the game. So now the Delta deploys in my deployment zone, coming in from a board edge, and I decide to just push him back in the corner where there's plenty of cover. With my second order, I move the gangbuster crawling along so that he doesn't attract an ARO from the Q drone, who has total reaction, which means that they'll be shooting on full burst, which would be very painful with an HMG. So my little gangbuster crawls upwards towards the console. So once he's done his initial move, which is only a short little 2, thanks to him being prone, and it gets him out of line of sight, he can then move a little bit further. So then with my second order, he's going to move his full 4 inches, no longer prone, and move up to the console. And my gangbuster then goes to try and activate the console with a quick roll, and it's a success. So my gangbuster manages to control the console. So then with my third and final order, the gangbuster moves up to the corner and awaits any AROs. The Caliban declares a dodge. My 5 is a hit on the Caliban. And his dodge is far too high, so the Caliban suffers a hit with AP ammo. And the 13, once you've added the modifiers, is not quite enough. The Caliban takes a wound, which is enough to knock him unconscious, but that puts the Caliban in Shasvastii embryo state, which is annoying because it means it's still earning points. So at the start of my turn, I allocated the Omega as my new lieutenant once the Gamma had died. So we actually have the lieutenant order to be able to spend on the Omega. And he's going to make the decision to try and shoot at the Caliban so that he's no longer in Shasvastii seed state, which means he's no longer scoring some points. So it's a bit of a wasted order, but unfortunately because of that Shasvastii keyword and this particular game mode, I'm not left with very many options. So it's a normal roll because the seed state decide that there's -3 for cover on the seed, and there's probably -3 for mimetism, but before we look up the rule and waste time on that, I just figured I'd roll, and if I'm close then we'll look at the rule. I'm on 14, which is a miss, so there's no need to look up the rule. This is lazy infinity, by the way. Don't check the rules, roll and see if then you need to bother wasting time. It works perfectly. Then we realized that my 1 roll was not enough, so I roll my additional dice to actually do the full burst value of the gun I was shooting with. It was burst 3, I've rolled 1 dice, so now I roll 2 more. And I roll massively too high, so we're saved from a dive into the rulebook. So that is the end of round 2. So when we look at the points at this stage, my opponent has more quadrants, which means that he gets 2 points, and I am still only on the 1 point that I managed to achieve at the first round. So currently, as it stands at the end of round 2, it is 3-1 to the Combined Army. Beginning of round 3, and it is the Combined Army turn. In terms of his order pool, he has lost the Caliban, and that is it. So he's down to 9 orders. So first order tries to reset the Shrouded from its immobilized B state. First roll fails, tries with the second order to do exactly the same thing, and is sadly successful. Now that was a reset on a -6, so not an easy thing to get. Third order, the Guelo goes for a little bit of a move, moves back, draws line of fire with the Gangbuster. So the Guelo moves back to get line of fire into the Gangbuster, and the Gangbuster's ARO is to dodge. The Guelo, of course, decides to shoot. Gangbuster has mimetism, -3, and the Gangbuster also has cover, but because of the range, that puts it +3. So basically the Guelo is only suffering a -3 for this shot. I successfully dodge on a 10, and I beat 3 of his successful dice, so my dodge is successful and his shot does not go through. So I choose to dodge the Gangbuster the 2 inches to take it out of line of sight of the Guelo, but put it into line of sight of something else. So the Gangbuster's in for a rough ride. His next order decides to move the Q drone up, and the Gangbuster is going to choose to dodge again. My 9's a good roll. He's looking for 11s, and unfortunately we see a crit there. So then I have to roll 2 saves on my Gangbuster, and unfortunately, even with those good rolls, the Gangbuster takes a wound. And that puts him unconscious. One thing to note is at this point, I run out of unconscious tokens because the game has been going so terribly bad. So luckily my opponent kindly lends me some. Order number 5, for him goes on the Shrouded. He basically pops out of the building, touches the console, and then dives back into the building with his first short skill. There are no AROs to face. I basically don't have enough models on the table anymore to cover any firing arcs, so he rolls to see if he successfully pushes the button, and that is successful. So then the other Shrouded decides to get into contact with the console and also try and boop that button, and he succeeds. So that is 2 consoles now. So we quickly move through orders 8 and 9 because there's not a lot of AROs. Basically re-camos the Malignos that was on the roof and re-camos the Shrouded that popped the other button. So that was orders 8 and 9. So Sheskin with the final order decides to run out of the building. Doesn't face any AROs, so decides to move again. And then the Lieutenant order goes on Sheskin and decides to move up again. The Omega gets an ARO this time and decides to ARO shoot the Sheskin. And Sheskin decides to shoot me back with the Red Fury. I'm going to use the DA profile for this shot. I'm hitting on straights with +3 for range, -3 for mimetism. And he is on -6. I go way too high. He's looking for 9s. The 2, the 4, and the 4 are good, so I have to make 3 saves. I am +3 for cover, but it's not good enough on one of those dice. Luckily, the Omega is a 2-wound model, so even though he's taken a wound, he can last until my turn. Here's the Lieutenant order first, so that I then have flexibility with the regular orders that are left. Decide to move the Omega upwards. Attracts an ARO from Sheskin, so he decides to dodge as his ARO, and I decide to shoot with the multi-rifle. I am +3 for range, -3 for nanoscreen, so I am on straights. I have 2 hits with my 1 and my 11. His 11 beats all of my dice though, so he successfully dodges and cancels out my hits. So with my regular order, I decide to move a few inches backwards just to keep that Sheskin out of dodge range, getting me. We then notice that the camo token at the back would get an ARO and should have gotten first round, but because we didn't declare it, didn't get it. Not first round, but first time. So that camo token gets an ARO this time. And then the camo token on the rooftop reveals it's a Noctifer, but luckily it's a Noctifer with a combi rifle and not an HMG, so not as painful as it could be. So in terms of his ARO, so he's obviously declared the camo token at the top. The Noctifer is going to ARO shoot with the combi rifle, and Sheskin is going to dodge again. In response to that, I decide to declare my second short skill. It's basically going to be putting all of my shots into Sheskin. I don't feel like the Noctifer is going to be able to hit me very well with the combi rifle, so I'm just going to ignore it. One of mine hits with a 5. So he is dodging on 15, so his 14 is perfect. It cancels out all of my hits, or it cancels out my 1 successful hit, but sadly he's also dodge +2. Which means that he gets to move 4 inches. So I was actually really lucky I moved back, because otherwise I would be engaged right now. So then Noctifer has his normal roll. He is on -9s. He is looking for 3s to hit. And rolls a 4. So luckily for me it's too high, but that was a bit close. So with my second to last order, or my second regular order, the Beta Trooper is going to move. I decide to move, so his AROs get 1 ARO from the camo token, which we know is a Malignos on the rooftop, and then the Guelo is also going to ARO. Both decide to shoot. I decide to split my shots, 1 on the Malignos and 2 on the Guelo with my SMG. I am -3 for both because they are in cover. We'll resolve the Guelo first. He's also suffering from -3 thanks to my mimetism on the Beta Trooper. Well, nanoscreen instead of cover on the Guelo, to be technically correct. I'm looking for 10s, and he is also looking for 10s. I get 2 6s, which is not bad. He gets a 2, my 2 shots go through. He has to make saves on the Guelo. So the 5 isn't enough to save the Guelo. He's in an unconscious state. The second save, sadly for me, is good. So he goes unconscious, which puts him into Shasvastii seed state, which we actually didn't do the first time he went unconscious. It's not often you get to say that about Guelo. But it matters this time because obviously it goes towards point scoring. Then we do resolve the attack between the Malignos and the Beta Trooper. where sadly I'm -9 because there's the -3 for cover and then the -6 for mimetism. And my 4 is a crit, which is a fantastic result. His shot for me is way too high, so he's now got to make 2 saves on the Malignos. Saves both of them, annoyingly, so lives to fight another day. So unfortunately my Beta Trooper is now forced to basically try and do that again because the Beta Trooper's got good points. The Guilo is still scoring points in that quadrant. I need the Malignos dead, ideally, so that it evens the odds on controlling that quadrant. So with my final order, I move the Beta Trooper up slightly to get within the optimal shooting range for the SMG, which takes me to a -6 instead of a -9. His ARO, so after figuring out that basically it's the same dice roll whether he dodges or shoots, he obviously decides to shoot because it's much more fun if he can kill me at the same time. So I obviously declare that my second short skill is going to be a shoot on the Malignos, so we are shooting each other. All of my dice are way too high with my -6 in play, and to be honest, even without it, these would be quite high dice. Luckily, his shot is also way too high, so nothing happens. Bit of an anticlimactic end to that round. So the first quadrant we check out, the Beta Trooper, the Malignos and the Guilo are all scoring points in that one. But the points of the Malignos and the Guilo combined outweigh that of the Beta Trooper, so the Combined Army controls it. The rear quadrant only has one model in it, and that is his Shrouded. Then in the far left-hand quadrant, near his deployment zone, he has a concealed Shrouded in there, and the Caliban in seed embryo state, so definitely has more points than me. And then in the quadrant closest to my deployment zone, he has Sheskin alive. I have the Omega alive. It's a little bit closer. Sheskin's 5.5 points, however, which I know is higher than the Omega because the only thing in my O12 list that is 5 or more is the Gamma. So sadly for me, that is a loss in my own quadrant because of Sheskin's high value. That means that he controls all 4 quadrants. I control 1 console. He controls 2 consoles, so he basically gets 2 points for controlling more quadrants than me. I get 1 point for the console that I control. He gets 2 points for each of the consoles he controls. So the final score for that game is 7 to Combined Army, 2 to O12. It was a pretty big defeat. I've definitely felt it through just the amount of models I lost. But was actually relatively surprised by how close it could have been had 1 or 2 things gone a little bit differently. The Delta, for example, had that have succeeded its role, it could have been a very different story because it would have been very difficult for him to clear the Delta from there, or he could have gone on a rampage and tried to kill the Guilo and the Malignos. You know, Infinity's not won on ifs and buts though, sadly, so this is another one. Now, interestingly, this Combined Army list that my opponent brought has been undefeated in every game of Code One it's played. I think that's just down to him being an awesome player, but it's very difficult for anyone to actually put anything against him that can beat it. And I can see why. Combined Army are very difficult to shift. They've got some very powerful models, they've got lots of mimetism, the camouflage is very difficult to counter. Those aren't excuses. I also played terribly, made some poor decisions. I think I'll take some different models. The Epsilons, for example, we had a discussion afterwards, and bringing 2 Epsilons, excellent idea, but don't leave them both out to basically be taken care of in the first turn. Definitely better to have 1 out so that kind of forces some decision making, but then keep the other one prone because ultimately you can pop out and just, if something's out in the open, you can pop it out turn 2 and just try and shoot some stuff. So I think I'll try and do that a bit more in the future. I've just had my Delta Yudbot arrive, and I think instead of just having a Delta Hacker, which is what I took that time, or a Delta Specialist Operative, I think I'm going to make a point of taking the Delta Medic or Delta Doctor, so that the Yudbot could potentially revive Epsilon or something if I'm successful in various whip rolls and things like that. So I am very good at having my models killed. I'm not very good at bringing them back to life. So hopefully my Delta Doctor will fix that. So that is that game. Obviously disappointing result for me, but my opponent was very good. Obviously the terrain looks stunning. That is a Battle Kiwi special. I have the great pleasure of being able to play against old Battle Kiwi. He's the guy who keeps kicking my butt, which is fantastic. Did enjoy this O12 list. I think it's got some huge potential. Gangbusters, I'm still struggling to really make them work. I obviously took 2 this time, lose 1 very early. I like the idea of infiltrators, but difficult to actually make them stick because they don't really do much. They've got MSV, they've got mimetism, but that still means that they're quite easy to remove. Epsilon's priceless. Hippolyta, I think if she can use well, she's still a keeper. The Omega's still good. The Gamma I didn't get to use very well, but he's obviously very good as well. So I still like the O12 list. I just need to do some finessing in how to play it properly and get the most. That Razor is an excellent model. I never really get a chance to use the mines because in Code One you've only got 10 orders. So actually spending a couple of orders to drop mines is a bit challenging. But again, I probably could have done that to just close off some of that advance into my quadrant a little bit better. So yeah, definitely things in hindsight. I've been playing this mission back, and obviously I get the chance to replay it quite literally and edit through it and just go, yep, that was a mistake. I would do that differently. So my learning experiences is good. Very excited for my next game and to experience a bit more Code One. I am loving the Code One format. Very much enjoying it. I don't think it's less of a game than N3 at all. It does obviously remove some of the complexity, but it's still a highly enjoyable game, even in this more basic form. I'm also excited for N4 when that drops and just see how much complexity they layer on. It'll be good to get some more hacking programs, for example. But this was a very enjoyable game. I really enjoyed playing O12 and going up against this combined army list. What would you have done differently? Do you agree with my list choice? Do you agree with any of the decisions I made? Feel free to drop into the comments anything you noticed, anything you think you would do slightly differently, or anything you learned that was of interest to you. As always, you can subscribe to the channel. I always appreciate it, and it means you get notified of when I drop new videos, which include product reviews and things like that too. And feel free to follow me on Instagram if you want. It's at @the_Infinity Gamer. Again, behind the scenes paintings, pictures of me gaming, of me painting models and doing product reviews and things like that. So feel free to follow. Thank you very much for your support. I really do appreciate it, and I'll catch you soon.